Day 147 to 7:38 p.m. Barracks, Karamoan Feeder Port, Gaijalo, Karamoan, Camarines Sur. Mark's group entered the makeshift building that was not any more than pieces of construction materials patched together. It was clear that this building was hastily made back when the outbreak started but was never built into a proper structure. "What kind of place is this?" Emika complained as she blew away the dust above some bedside tables. Not only the old tables and chairs, but even the ragged beds were dusty. It seemed that this place had not received proper cleaning for a long time. "You don't have to complain. At least, it's not as dusty as an abandoned house," Mark said, ruffling Emika's green hair. What he said was true. An abandoned house would be even dustier and, for the worst situations, had dead bodies lying about. Still, for a dwelling inside a military encampment, this kind of thing was not acceptable. But what could they do? "Gerger, should I take out the beddings?" May asked. "Take it out. We can't use these dirty beds as it is," Mark replied. Of course, Mark's group was prepared for this journey. They knew that they would not be able to travel along the way in just one day. It was already surprising that they reached this place in one go. Actually, at a regular pace, they would need at least 1.5 days to arrive here. However, they rushed it, going straight at this port even though the sun had already set. Why? They wanted a proper place to butcher the giant octopus. At best, they wanted it to be alive and fresh. Unfortunately, the shortest way to reach this place was going over several mountains where seawater was non-existent. Thus, halfway through the journey, the food they wanted to stay alive already died and had to be stored inside Mark's ring. Although time was not stopped inside the ring, in the least, its body would be away from other elements that could hasten its loss of freshness. After all, who would not want fresh seafood to eat? As Mark agreed, May activated her ring, taking out several beddings made of soft fur. These were tailored from the skins of evolved animals that were hunted in the mountains. Most were large mountain rats and deers, though, and while some came from the same animal species, it had different colors due to the difference in their evolution characteristics. "Let me help," Pearl said, volunteering to help May cover the dusty beds with the fur beddings she took out. "Wow, those rings are really convenient," Emika remarked. It was the second time she saw this as Mark had shown his when storing the octopus. In the least, she was not spoiled enough to say that she also wanted one. Still, she was amazed at how Mark's group had such magical items. Nevertheless, it was not surprising considering Mark had a Mihan, and there was also Pephile that was now in disguise. Speaking of a Mihan, "Puha, Master, are you not going to let me out?" Emihan yelled as her head popped out of Mark's backpack. This sylph had already lost her ability to hide from the sight of humans. Thus, she could only hide inside the bag. "My bad," Mark replied as he put down the backpack and let Emihan out. Aside from Emihan, there was also Ivy that Mark had brought this time. As the two got out, the bag was practically empty. It was just something for disguise, after all. "Why does she have to hide anyway? Uncle, didn't you just let her sit on your shoulder back then in Bay City?" Emika asked, and she was not wrong. Back in Bay City, Emihan was out for everyone to see. That was also the case in the new Infanta settlement. Now, however, he was making her hide. Not only her, but even Chaflar was also left in the mountains, waiting for his orders. "It's because we don't know who is an ally and who is an enemy in this place yet," Mark replied. "The situation in this place is different from the other two settlements you had been before. It is better to hide our cards in the beginning just in case." "Ah! A wolf in sheep's skin," Emika exclaimed. It seemed that she was rather enjoying it. It was not hard to do, actually. Their group was composed of 3 men, 2 women, and 4 children. It appeared to be a pretty harmless group. Of course, that was if the opposite party forgot the part that this group actually traveled from Infanta to this place. A group that could do such a thing, even with a vehicle, was not your typical group of survivors. It was quite impossible to do in these times, even if all the members of the group were all grown men. It did not take long, and the beddings were fixed, They even cleaned the place a bit. By the way, Uncle, Emika remembered something. I've read manga and novels giving packets of cigarettes and a pack of noodles to their guides. You're the first one I saw throw a can of tuna. Seriously, you can't zip your mouth, do you? Mark complained. Not everyone smokes, and a pack of noodles is not that good when the person can't boil water. Unless the guy wanted to eat it crunchy. Even if he managed to cook it, he won't be able to eat it alone since the smell would scatter everywhere. You should know what comes next after that. There's no way a good soldier would be able to reject his comrades if they asked him for some. In the least, an easy open can of tuna could be eaten immediately in a corner. Ah, I see. Emika nodded. She agreed with what Mark did. Gerger, what should we do about dinner? May asked. In fact, there was no mention of dinner being given by the soldiers at all. Of course, we are cooking. Mark said as he pulled out a tentacle of the octopus from his ring. Takoyaki would be good, but we can't really cook something like that here. Let's just marinate it a bit and cover it with breading. And with that, they started cooking inside the dilapidated barracks. Asterisk asterisk. How is that group that arrived earlier? The fat soldier, Captain Zachariah, asked one of the soldiers that were on patrol. Captain Zachariah was currently sitting in the office area, looking closely at the letter that was still with him. He was trying to examine if this letter was real or not. Unfortunately, from the format to the seal, there was no doubt that it was authentic. Sir, that group is now at the temporary shelter. The soldier replied. They didn't come out or ask anything. How about food? Most survivors that arrived here before were like starving dogs asking for food the moment they arrived. Captain Zachariah said with eyes filled with contempt. Nothing of sorts, sir. The soldier replied with a little shake of his head. Oh well, no matter. It's better if they don't ask. We can conserve more food that way. You can go now. The fat captain said as he drove his subordinate away. With those words, the soldier turned around and left. The moment the captain could not see his face anymore, his expression changed, gritting his teeth in annoyance. Captain Zachariah did not notice that since his mind was preoccupied with something else. As the soldier left his office, he started to rummage on his things. He soon found a radio. Strangely, though, it was not a model that was currently being used by the military. He was supposed to report to the higher positions about the arrival of the messengers from Infanta settlement, but for sure, it was not them that this fat man was trying to contact. Asterisk asterisk. Conserving food, my ass. You're the one who should conserve on food, you pig. The soldier grumbled after he closed the door of the office. He then left, looking for his close friend. Unexpectedly, the soldier did not find his friend in the usual spots. Looking around some more, he found his friend, Private Geronimo. He was hiding at the sandy part of the port below the deck. The soldier was confused as to what his friend was doing here, sitting in the corner. Geronimo did not notice him. As such, it was time to sneak on the guy. Bua! The soldier cried out as he grabbed Geronimo's shoulders. **T. Geronimo jumped, shocked. FCK, Padua, you scared me. Geronimo's face was pale as he received the scare of his life. However, he noticed that it was not only him who was surprised. Padua was staring at him. No, his hand. He noticed that he was still holding onto what he was eating sneakily. You want? Geronimo said awkwardly. **T, dude. Give me some. Padua said without shame. The two were friends since they were just cadets. Having a face between the two was history. With that, the two sat down, sharing the can of tuna together. Damn. This is good. It's been a long time I got to eat something like this. The rations we receives tastes like **T. Padua said, munching on the flakes of tuna in his spoon. Seriously, pipe down. Geronimo complained. You're already a soldier. Stop spewing curses everywhere and have some decorum. Who minds decorum in a private matter? Even our president curses in his speeches. Padua replied, making Geronimo sigh. You really got this from those guys? If I knew, I would have volunteered to guide them. Padua added after hearing where the can of tuna came from. At first, he thought that his friend stole it somewhere. It's not like I volunteered myself, all right? Geronimo shrugged. I just got lucky. Lucky, my ass. Padua retorted. You're just being bullied by that fat bastard, and that is why he always calls you to do menial tasks. That was right. While Padua was a person that was giving a decent front but was hard to control in the back, Geronimo was the opposite. Thus, he was easy to be targeted by bullying even back in the academy. Fortunately, Padua was there to shield him at those times. Unfortunately, even Padua could not do anything to the fat bastard that was ordering them right now. Well, Geronimo was also right, though. Amidst the bullying, he received a large can of tuna to snack on. In fact, he only wanted to eat half of it and gave the other half to Padua sneakily. There was no need to do that now, however. While the two were eating sneakily, a sudden commotion entered their ears. Along with the noise, a fragrant smell entered their noses, making their stomachs grumble. What the F***? Padua cried out. Is someone cooking? Without thinking, Padua stood up, sniffing the direction where the smell was coming from. It is coming from there. Padua started to follow the smell before turning back to Geronimo. Let's go. Geronimo could only scratch his head and followed behind his friend. Soon, they arrived at the place where the smell was coming from. To no surprise, not only the two friends were here, but there were also other soldiers. It was not wrong to say that all of the soldiers currently not on duty were attracted to the smell. It was expected since the port was just small. The unexpected thing, however, the smell was coming from the dilapidated barracks. And thus, everyone was confused. Mass hallucination? Maybe. After all, that place had no cooking equipment at all. And right now, only that group that arrived earlier was inside. However, none of them saw the group having large baggage at all. There was no way that they could have brought cooking equipment. What is going on here? A grouchy roar was heard and the soldiers parted to make way. Of course, it was no other than the pig captain, Zachariah. The soldiers became silent, but the commotion did not die down. After all, the smell of freshly fried food continuously entered their noses. It was torture on their stomachs that was used to eating tasteless food. Day 146 to 7:59 p.m. Barracks, Caramoan Feeder Port, Gaijalo, Caramoan, Camarines Sur. It's getting noisy outside, May said with a frown. Together with Pearl, she was frying the breaded octopus cuts using a portable stove. Even with the sizzling sound of the oil in the saucepan, she could hear the noise coming from outside. Don't mind them. Mark ruffled May's hair as he stood behind her to see the octopus inside the saucepan. By Odalina's teachings, May, who barely had experience in the kitchen before, could now cook dishes perfectly. She was even careful that both sides of the octopus cut were evenly fried, flipping it every now and then. Big Sister May, how long will it take? I'm hungry. Emika asked while sitting on her bed. Just from the smell, it looked like she was about to drool. Wait patiently, will you? Mark shrugged as he pointed his daughters with his eyes. Look, they are younger than you, but they are waiting patiently. Emika turned to the three girls that were also waiting for the food. Well, only two of them since Miracle could not eat anything aside from blood. This made Emika a bit embarrassed. She was 2 years older than Iola, the oldest of the three who was just 11, and yet, she appeared to be the most childish. Her face turned a bit sour as she finally chose to zip her mouth and wait. Still, the smell of fried food was just that appetizing. It was too appetizing that even the soldiers, who were supposed to be disciplined people, could not help but gather outside the barracks. But then, Mark shrugged as he suddenly turned around and approached the door to everyone's confusion. On the other hand, Pephile sighed. Mark was up to something evil again. Mark pulled the door open without warning, wearing a bland expression on his face. Outside the door was the fat captain, with his right hand, awkwardly stretched out, about to push the door open. The surprise on the fat guy's face was phenomenal as his small eyes surrounded by fat were opened widely. Is there a problem? Mark asked, purposely ignoring the fat guy's posture, making him even more embarrassed as he retracted his hand. Who knows who it was, but some giggling could be heard among the soldiers. Their fat captain's face was twitching, but he tried hard to hide it. Unfortunately, his shaking face fat exposed his fury. Ahem. Captain Zachariah faked a cough. We're just checking if the accommodation is fine. If not, we can relocate you somewhere else. The fat captain smiled as he gave the offer. He tried to be amicable as possible, showing that he cared about the well-being of General Faustino's messengers. It also seemed that by the current state of this temporary shelter, anyone would want to go to a better one. But to his further surprise, "Oh, thank you for the offer, but we are fine right here. But checking, really? With all of you here?" Mark replied, panning his eyes to the soldiers outside, slowly retracting his expression to a frown. "Why'd I feel like you're here to rob us instead?" The fat captain choked. He turned around, panning his eyes to the soldiers behind him. "What are all of you doing here? Go back where you all came from." Captain Zachariah yelled at his subordinates. And with sour faces, they all turned around to leave with drools on their mouths. Although none of them actually expected to be shared with the food that lured them here, being chased away like this was different. Even so, none of them wanted to offend this fat superior of theirs, and as such, they could do nothing but leave. But suddenly, "Wait, you two," Mark shouted, making the leaving soldiers look back. Unexpectedly, he was calling unto two soldiers. And, of course, one of them was no other than their guide earlier. Us? Padua and Geronimo could not help but look at each other in confusion. Geronimo was one thing, but why Padua too? "Come here and wait for a bit." Mark beckoned the two to everyone's confusion. No one knows what was going on. And thus, while the other soldiers left the vicinity, they still stayed where they could see what was going on. As the two approached, not understanding what was happening, Mark closed the door and headed in. Sure enough, Captain Zachariah was already boiling inside. After calling the two, Mark did not pay attention to him at all. It took only a minute or two, and the door opened again with Mark holding a clear plastic box. "Here, for you two." Mark handed the plastic box with the contents plain for everyone to see. It was not really dark here in the encampment because of the solar-powered lights installed here and there. And to say, everyone that could see the contents were envious. Not to mention Captain Zachariah, who was standing closest to the two. Who knows what it was, but it was obviously a piping hot crispy fried food. "Sir, you're really giving this to us?" Geronimo asked, unable to believe what was going on. Before, it was a can of tuna, and now, this. It was strange, though, that Padua's share was included in this. It was as if their guest knew that he shared the tuna with his friend. "That's right," Mark replied. "You two better eat it while it's still hot." "Really, thanks, sir, thank you." Padua and Geronimo thanked respectively. After they did, they left, as if running away. Mark then turned to the fat guy that was still waiting for some reason. "Do you have any other business with us? I already said that we're fine here." Captain Zaharia did not know what he should use as an alibi now, thus. "No, nothing. That's all right then, good night," Mark said as he closed the door in front of the fat soldier. Sure enough, Captain Zachariah was fuming with rage inside. He stared for half a minute at the door before leaving, stomping the ground all the way to his office. Of course, his fury would not subside just like that. Unfortunately, these people were messengers from Infanta settlement. He could not make a move on them at this moment. "Those bastards can wait for later," Captain Zachariah murmured. "For now, I should deal with those two pests." Those two pests, there was no need to ask who. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. "You totally infuriated that guy," Pephile said as Mark closed the door. "What can he do then?" Mark shrugged. "We're here as messengers carrying a package sent by a military general. They can't do anything until we hand over the package." It was true. As long as they had the package, even if the recipient was the enemy, they could not do anything. Well, at least if they want to receive the package intact. If they made a move and the carrier destroyed the package or threw it in the ocean, it would be a loss. Anything said by a high-ranking person at these times would not be just some trivial items. "Uncle, you're bad," Emika said, laughing. "That fat guy wanted to invite us, so we don't have any choice but share our food, huh? Dream on." Emika was spot on. Captain Zachariah tried to use the issue with the dilapidated barracks to invite them and receive a share of the food. What a thick-faced bastard. Unfortunately for him, Mark's group would not fall to such schemes easily. "But master, will those two be fine?" Emihan asked. Those two did not seem to be bad people. The other guy sounded quite frank, though. Mark gave them food in front of everyone. Who knows what could happen? "Don't worry. They'll be fine." Mark smiled. "Come on. Let's eat and not worry about those people. They're not worth our time." And there, with many things in mind, they had their dinner. Sure enough, fresh seafood tasted good. Asterisk 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 at the same time that Mark's group were eating, Geronimo and Zachariah became everyone's target. Those that were quite close to them asked for a bite of their food, and the two gladly complied. Unfortunately, some were thick-faced enough to ask for a share despite not being close to the two. And some were under the fat captain that was among the people bullying Geronimo. "Hey, you two are being called by the captain." A muscular man called out to the two that had not yet gotten a proper bite of their food. "Can we eat first?" Padua complained. "You two need to be there ASAP. Move." Being urged to go like that, the two had no choice but to obey. "Let me carry that." The muscular man tried to reach out to the plastic box on Geronimo's hands, but Padua snatched it first. "I'm carrying this. We're poor people. We can't afford a baggage carrier." "What did you say?" The muscular man was infuriated. After all, even though it sounded like Padua was describing his status in life, he blatantly just called the other guy a baggage carrier. Padua got thrown onto the ground. He was punched brutally. Padua might be a soldier, but an average-bodied person like him would not be able to handle a sudden attack from a muscle-buffed person. "Padua." Geronimo immediately came to his friend's aid. However, Padua's eyes were glued onto something else. When the former turned to what his friend was looking at, he saw that their food was thrown to the ground, lid open, and the fried slices of food covered in dirt. "FCK. I haven't gotten a single bite of that yet." Padua roared as he drew the pistol on his waist. Bang! The roar of a gunshot echoed in the pier as Padua fired his gun without hesitation. "FCK. The muscular man cried in pain, grasping his bloody left shoulder. Fortunately, he evaded at the last moment. Padua was aiming to kill him, aiming directly to his heart. Due to that, Padua was jumped over by his comrades, restraining him from his rampage. At the same time, Geronimo was also forcefully brought back by the soldiers that came with that muscular guy. It seemed that at this time, the two of them were going to face insubordination. All of this was just because of food. Asterisk 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 unknown to the soldiers participating in the commotion, the devil is monitoring the whole pier. As he sat on the bed with May leaning on his shoulder, his eyes were glowing red, and sparks could be seen around it. That conflict was not supposed to happen. However, Mark threw some wood to fuel the fire. Channeling the rage of that fat bastard to those two that were involved, the conflict was created. It was not like he had a grudge against those two friends to do this to them. However, he needed some people to serve as bait to lure out the enemies. And Mark succeeded. Monitoring the emotional fluctuations of the soldiers in that conflict, he discerned who was together with that fat captain and who was not. Unfortunately, even among the friends of those two soldiers, there were some wolves in disguise. But the most unexpected thing, however, it seemed that the soldiers here did not only belong to two parties. A third one was watching the commotion unfold. Mark started to wonder. The first faction was the ones following the military conduct. They were serving as per their duty. The second was following Captain Zachariah, who, for obvious reasons, smelled like rotten potato among the potato stack. The third faction was questionable, though. Who were they following? It was odd. In any case, Mark already got what he wanted. Of course, he would not let those two soldiers suffer just because they became bait in his plans. After all, aside from just being a messenger to deliver a package, he had other reasons to be here. Day 146 to 9:21 p.m. Detention Room, Military Office, Karamoan Feeder Port, Gaijalo, Karamoan, Camarines Sir. Growl. Ouch. Padua complained, holding his growling stomach while facing the dark ceiling as he lay down on the cold floor. His whole body was aching too much that he could not move. On his face and hands, bruises could be seen. Just by his current appearance, there was no need to ask what happened after that commotion. It was a great offense for Padua to shoot another soldier, even before the outbreak. What was worse was that the guy was one of the lackeys of the unreasonable Captain Zachariah. The right-hand man, in fact. Since Padua shot him out of rage, they were punished. Well, it was more than a one-side beating than an actual punishment. Held by two other soldiers, Padua was pummeled with punches and kicks by several other soldiers. And the captain in question was watching at the side filled with satisfaction on his face. The two were already fortunate that they were not killed. From the personality of that fat bastard, it was not far off. They were lucky that they were still a part of the soldiers under him. If two people suddenly died because of this, even he would have a hard time keeping his current post. After all, they were soldiers. Their punishment needed to come from the higher-ups. It was unless they resisted, which did not happen upon their arrest. If they resisted, being shot on the spot was not surprising. Still, they were not put in detention scot-free, and that resulted in Padua's current state as the perpetrator. At the corner of the room, Geronimo sat, sighing at the current state of his friend. Just why did you have to shoot that guy? You could have just given them that food. It's just food, not worth exchanging your life for. I don't know, dude. Padua raised his head slightly to look at his friend. I don't know. I just did it. My sight just grew dark. The next thing I knew, already shot the gun. Padua's voice was a bit weak, and there was a bit of air in between his words. His body pain right now was not a joke. His cracked lips made it even harder to talk. Not only we didn't get to have even a bite, but I got beaten up instead. That fat bastard will have his day in the future. I wish too. Geronimo sighed. Unfortunately, the two were not expecting that to happen anytime soon. This guy had close ties with one of the higher-ups, after all. If not, there was no way that someone as incompetent as that fat bastard would be posted in this encampment to lead the soldiers. If not, the other soldiers would not be afraid of him. If not, it would be easy to throw that fat guy off the deck. There were a lot of ifs. Unfortunately, it would remain as ifs. I wonder what will happen to us now, Geronimo said, wondering about their future. Probably, forced into labor. That's where those who broke the law are going these days. But I didn't do anything, Geronimo complained. You did. You are seriously saying that? Padua glared. Want me to give you the same bruises I have? Go on. Do it. You can't even stand up from there. Geronimo taunted. Then, there was silence, before the two burst out laughing. Ouch. Don't make me laugh, it hurts, Padua complained, holding his stomach in pain. Really, it hurts? Geronimo approached his friend and started poking on his bruised arm. I don't feel anything. F***ck. Stop it. Padua pulled his arm away. Seriously, if you are like this to other people, you won't get bullied. They would probably punch me, so, no, **t. The two went on their antics, trying to forget the predicament they were currently facing. Soon, silence enveloped the dark, cold room once more. Ha. Geronimo sighed. Dad will surely punch me if he knew that I got detained as a soldier. Padua looked at his friend before looking back at the dark ceiling. Your family members are dead already. Get over it. Want to sit down? Geronimo asked. F***cku. Padua cursed his friend. His whole body was in pain, and the cold floor was helping him reduce it a bit. Besides, it would ache more if he sat down. Geronimo then went and lay down on the cold floor like his friend. We are here, protecting other people as this country's soldiers, but when our family needed us, we are not there to protect them. Now, we are here being treated like this. What's the point? Like most soldiers on service during the outbreak, these two young soldiers lost their families to the infected. Once more, silence enveloped the room covered in darkness. But then, why not leave the military, then? A voice from the dark made the two young soldiers jump. Well, only Geronimo. Padua could not even move from the pain. Nevertheless, the poor soldier did not need to lift himself up at all. The two soldiers were surprised. They did not hear the door open at all. It was impossible not to notice it as it was a cranky metal door that barely had maintenance. Even just opening the lock would create too much noise. Despite the surprise, the two could not help but squint their eyes. Even if their eyes adapted to the darkness already, it was still hard to see a person's face. But then, like magic, a crystal appeared and floated above the shoulder of their guest. It illuminated the room, making their eyes hurt a bit. As their eyes adapted to the light, rather than the floating crystal, the person itself surprised them further. Out of all people that could possibly appear here, it was actually the man that gave them the fried food earlier. It was the person that introduced their group as messengers from the military settlement in Infanta. They could not believe it as there was no way that anyone not a member of the military stationed here would be allowed to enter this place. Well, not even the soldiers not close to their fat captain. And considering what happened earlier, there was no way that this person would be allowed here at all. How did you? Geronimo asked in wonder. Does it really matter how I got here? The person asked back. I don't think it matters anymore, but just who the hell are you, really? Padua replied. Aren't I a messenger from New Infanta settlement that came here to deliver a package? The man replied. If you're asking for a name, then just call me Mark. The two soldiers stared at Mark like a weirdo. Well, that was not wrong either way. Compared to all the people they met before, Mark was giving them a mysteriously weird vibe. What do you need from us? Geronimo stopped thinking about how Mark managed to enter this place. What was more important was why he was here talking to them. Mark tapped his chin. Because I owe you two a bit? Those words made the two very confused. Mark did not mind their expressions, and out of who knows where, he took out another plastic box. You two haven't eaten a single bite yet, right? Mark approached Geronimo and handed the thing in his hand. Unexpectedly, the contents of the plastic box were another serving of that fried food. This made the stomach of the two young soldiers groan without control, but then, it finally entered Geronimo's mind. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Dude, what are you talking about? Padua asked his friend. However, Geronimo's eyes were focused on Mark. Giving us food in front of everyone. You did that on purpose. In the first place, it was strange that you also called Padua. I won't be that surprising if you called me and gave it to me alone, but calling him. It's as if you knew that we are close friends. Geronimo was now glaring at Mark. The more he thought about it, the more things became clearer. Well, at least in some parts. After all, he could not think of how Mark knew that he and Padua were friends. Even his intention was a huge question mark. And Mark? Yep, I did it on purpose. Did not even deny it. It made the two soldiers look at with frowns on their faces. Don't look at me like that. That's why I said that I owed you two a bit. You owe us? Look at Padua right now. Geronimo stood up in anger. Are you really going to shout like that? You want to get the attention of that fat guy? Mark said with a shrug. And so? Geronimo replied. He was really angry at Mark for putting them into this mess. However, it seemed that Padua was calmer than Geronimo at this moment. Dude, calm down, Padua called out. This guy can enter this place without being caught. Your shouting might not matter to him at all. Instead, we will get in more trouble for making too much noise. The words of his friend made Geronimo pipe down a bit. If you are angry at me because of his injuries, then make him drink this. Like before, Mark seemed to be taking things out of nowhere as now, he held a sealed test tube-shaped vial. He then threw it to Geronimo, forcing the soldier to catch it. What is this? Of course, the soldier would ask. One of the things I'm supposed to deliver. What? Of course, the two were surprised. Don't worry. That's mine. I didn't touch the contents of the package at all. I already said at the gates earlier. The case had a passcode. Mark explained. As for what that is, just make your friend drink it, and you will see. It's not harmful, and even though the production is quite slow, that liquid is already being used in Infanta. Geronimo stared at Mark for a bit. However, he could not tell whether Mark was lying or not. In fact, it felt like the things he was nothing but the truth. The young soldier looked at the item in his hand before turning to his friend. Want to drink this? Just let me drink it. Padua gritted his teeth as he forcibly lifted his body up. With Geronimo's help, he drank the contents of the test tube. And there, the magic ensued. Padua's face slowly eased as the pain in his body started to vanish. His bruises started to heal at an alarming rate. Even his cracked lips and gums healed perfectly. Well, he was still feeling some muscle aches at the parts that were rather heavily injured. See, it's not harmful. Mark spoke. It can immediately heal light injuries. Heavier ones will take time, though. And it can't heal fatal injuries, unfortunately. To give us something this valuable. Geronimo looked at the empty vial in his hand. He definitely knew the value of this thing in these times where a single scratch might lead to death. Just why are you doing all of this? Geronimo asked. I have my reasons, Mark replied. But for now, I want to ask you some questions. What questions? Padua asked this time. About the current situation of Katandwanas. The information I have is quite outdated. Also, by the looks of it, there are some things that are not reported at all. I want to know everything you can tell me. At Mark's request, Geronimo and Padua looked at each other. Geronimo was still angry at Mark for using him and Padua. However, since Mark went ahead and gave them valuable medicine, he had no choice but to comply. There was nothing to lose if what Mark only wanted was information. Day 147 to 12:02 a.m. Barracks, Karamoan Feeder Port, Gihalo, Karamoan, Camarines Sir. Hearing what he wanted to hear from the two young soldiers, Mark decided to return. Just like how he appeared too suddenly, with Mark turning into a clump of black mist and disappearing from their sight gave the two soldiers quite a scare. Mark appeared at the roof of the office building, looking over the surroundings. He could only sigh as he now knew how the reported information vastly differed from the actual situation. Shaking his head at how humans behave even in this situation, Mark decided to return to their dwelling. The moment that Mark entered the door, he saw May waiting for him. Still awake? Mark could not help but ask, "It's hard to sleep." She replied with a deep sigh. Mark shrugged. He could tell that she was feeling insecure sleeping in an unfamiliar place. It was even more because it was a place where it seemed that not a single female soldier was in sight. Looking around, Pephile was still awake while the others were already asleep. You should rest too. Mark told the Tamawo as he made his way towards May. Don't worry about me. Unlike humans, we spirit races don't need that much sleep. You sure? Mark asked as he turned to a Mihon that was already drooling on a makeshift bed made of folded fur placed on Mark's backpack. That little girl is different, all right? Even among eccentrics, she's a strange one. Mark could not agree more. Among the spirit races that he saw before, all of them appeared to be detached from others. Family members were even included. That was why a Mihon, Torimalio, and his harem, appeared to be strange with their odd behaviors and bonds with people around them. All right, then. Mark said as he took a seat beside May and pulled her close. I'm back, so sleep already. With that, May laid down on the bed. The bed was small. 2 or 3 children might be able to share, but 2 adults would not fit at all. Well, Mark did not plan on sleeping at all, so it was no problem. They were currently in an unfamiliar and pretty hostile environment. Resting without care might result in bad situations. Thus, for the remainder of the night, Mark would sit down beside May. He would watch over her and the little girls. With Mark's warm right hand caressing her hair, May fell asleep while holding onto his left. It was when Pephile suddenly asked a question. "You look bad, did you learn something?" Mark could not help but look at Pephile. He was wearing his usual poker face. Just how did this guy notice? "Your expression might be empty, but your eyes looked deep," Pephile said, understanding Mark's stare. "A lot is going on in Katandwanas right now. But the military station there did not report most of it." "And the reason?" Pephile asked. "Who knows?" Mark shrugged. "Though, one reason is most likely because of pride." "Pride?" Pephile asked. "Despite the setbacks, Bay City and the new Infanta settlement is doing well. Tell me. Tamawas are prideful races, so you might be able to answer it. If you are a leader of one of the military settlements and the situation is bad, compared to the others, will you tell them?" "Probably no, unless there's no way of controlling the situation anymore," Pephile replied. "Bingo." Mark nodded. "Though for now, it's just our speculations." "Is the situation really bad?" Pephile asked another question. "More than half of the island is already under the control of the rebels. Tell me if that's bad or not." "No matter how you look at it, that's pretty bad already." Pephile was right in his answer. The situation was already bad. The island province of Katandwanas had an area of more than 570 square miles. As the 12th largest island in the Philippines, half of it falling to the control of the rebels was already a big deal. And yet, the military branch stationed on the island chose to hide this fact. The latest data in the papers Mark received was more than a week ago. However, it was already more than a month when the rebels gained control of half the island. They deliberately hid the information to keep face, even though they were already endangering the people they should be protecting. And that was not the worst part. As Mark had thought, the military in Katandwanas was also broken into different factions. 3 factions, to be exact. It was still unknown whether it had something to do with the NPA also having 3. Nevertheless, it was what Mark noticed earlier. The soldiers here in this encampment were also divided into 3. The world is already ending, but humans still chose to divide themselves despite being the most affected ones, Pephile said, scratching his head. "Well, it's not like the spirit races were any different." That was right. With the case of the black duendes, the spirit races were not that different from humans in this regard. Pephile then looked at Mark directly. "Are you going to meddle in the situation here?" "Depends on the situation," Mark replied with a shrug. "If things overlapped with my business here, then I will not have any other choice but to join in." Mark then took a deep breath as silence enveloped the barracks. His reason for coming here was to check how his family was doing. He was not sure whether he would take them with him. After all, his relationship with them was rather on the bad side. Furthermore, he was now doing well without them. Taking them away might become against Mark's favor. In the least, if Mark chose not to bring them away, he might still be able to make things better in this place for them. However, before everything else, there was another problem with them. It was because none of his family members were registered in the list of refugees given to him. With those thoughts, the night passed rather quickly. At 9 in the morning, the soldiers in the port became busy. It was because the boat from the Katandwanas settlement finally arrived. The soldiers were busy running around, loading and unloading supplies and equipment into the boat. At the same time, Mark's group was also called to the dock, with Captain Zachariah introducing them to the person in charge of the boat. However, it seemed that the identity of Mark's group was already reported to the higher-ups, as the soldiers on the boat were not surprised that there were people that arrived last night to enter the island. Still, they were surprised to see children, and, of course, May's appearance. First Lieutenant Hernan Ignacio. The person introduced himself, stretching his hand towards Mark, who was introduced as the group's leader. "Mark." Mark returned the gesture. Your group came from Infanta, yes? First Lieutenant Ignacio said. You must be strong to lead them to this place. The lieutenant smiled, complimenting Mark. However, it seemed that while he complimented Mark and looked favorably at Pefile and Edsel, it seemed that he viewed the children and women as nothing but baggage to be protected. Mark did not mind it, though. It would be better if this person thought that way. Then, Lieutenant Ignacio continued. Please wait first until we finish loading the cargo. Then, we'll set off. At this time, a few soldiers came. They were bringing not only the cargo to be loaded on the boat but also a muscular man carried on a stretcher. There were also the two young soldiers, Geronimo and Padua, being escorted with their hands cuffed. When Captain Zachariah saw Padua, however, he was shocked. You? How did you? The fat captain could not voice out his question properly. After all, last night, he made sure that Padua was not even in a condition capable of moving. Yet, not only Padua could move properly, all his wounds were gone. Thanks to you, I became an evolver. Happy now? Padua taunted. There was no need for him to hold back anymore as he was going to get transported by boat back to Catanduanes. But becoming an evolver? That was nothing but a ruse. After all, there was no way that they would tell what healed Padua. Well, that suggestion itself came from Mark before they parted. Saying that Padua became an evolver would be more plausible. Well, there was another reason why Padua taunted the fat guy. Mutators and evolvers were highly valued in Catanduanes settlement due to the threat that the rebels brought. Even the rebels had such people in their ranks, both mutators and evolvers. That was why the settlement needed more to balance things out. And if Padua became an evolver, what happened last night would be dismissed, and the schemes of Captain Zachariah against the two would be in vain. Although it was not true, it was enough to turn Captain Zachariah's face blue. That was what Padua wanted to see as he laughed, infuriating the fat guy even more. The cargo loading took about a half hour before it finished. Now, Mark's group, together with the two young soldiers, and the injured muscular man boarded the boat. Mark looked at the boat. It was not too big but enough to carry supplies around. From what he remembered, it was a Coast Guard patrol vessel, a Parola Class 1. Soldiers guarding the boat also boarded as Mark's group took a seat inside, and there, without making too much noise, they set off to Catanduanes. Leaving the port, the boat moved, following a route near the coastline. Since the waters near the coast were shallower, it would be easier to spot dangers coming from below. The soldiers were being extra careful in monitoring the surroundings. In fact, this schedule that the boat was taking was the safest so far as they knew. Most of the evolved animals in these parts would hunt food at night and would be asleep during the day. Traveling in the morning was more ideal as it was the time where the most dangerous creatures go deeper below the ocean to rest. And to say, the journey along the coast was strangely uneventful. Even at the safest hours, there would be one or two evolved fishes trying to gnaw on the boat. Now, however, none appeared. It was strange. Soon, they reached the tip of the mainland, closest to Catanduanes. From here, the mountainous island grew bigger and bigger, in everyone's eyes. The lush green mountains were refreshing to see together with the salty breeze of the morning sea. From the tip of the mainland, they traversed the northern part of Langanoi Gulf, going straight to the dock in the small village in Codon, Catanduanes. Well, it was not just a small village anymore. With the military making it as the headquarters on this island, along with the influx of refugees that entered this place, it had grown bigger, and well, less secure. With too many people in this place now, it would be hard to maintain everything in balance. The soldiers were starting to feel at ease with no danger in sight as they entered the Gulf. They could even see the port from the distance. Unfortunately, it would not be easy. Enemies, one of the soldiers shouted. From the north, a group of motorboats came rushing towards the patrol vessel. It seemed that they had been waiting, laying an ambush while hiding behind an island nearby. 1, 2. 7 boats, huh? Mark murmured, counting the number of enemy boats approaching. At this moment, First Lieutenant Ignacio spoke to Mark's group. Please sit and wait. The boats are not shooting at us yet, we would try to negotiate. Lieutenant Ignacio then grabbed the mouthpiece of the open-channel communication radio, trying to contact the enemies. However, no answer came to his calls and the enemy boats were still rushing. With the lieutenant's instructions, they tried to delay the enemies. However, there were just no escaping the motorboats with the huge patrol boat they were riding on. It did not take long and their boat was surrounded by the enemies. Day 147 to 9:58 a.m. Langanoy Gulf, Caramoan, Camarines Sur. A military Parola-class patrol vessel being surrounded by 11 tourist speedboats. This was the current scene in the middle of the sea strait that separated the peninsula of Caramoan and the island of Catanduanes. The military boat might be a bit big, but the standard complement size in these boat models was only 25 people, 5 officers, and 20 enlists. That was the current number of soldiers on board, excluding Mark's group and the 3 that boarded the boat only for transport. Comparing that number to 10 8-seater tourist boats filled with armed men, the side of the military was definitely in a disadvantageous position. Lieutenant Ignacio stepped out, facing what seemed to be the boat leading the enemies. "What is the meaning of this?" the lieutenant shouted. "Our camps had an agreement about this." Mark listened to the lieutenant. Those that were not in the know would think that the military was working with the rebels. But fortunately, that was not the case here. Land encounters on the island were one thing since it was already the circumstances even before the outbreak. On the other hand, there was an agreement between the military and the NPA when it came to the encounters on water, especially in this area. As long as there was no ongoing skirmish, water transports were free to go in and out of the island. It applied to both parties. After all, supplies were needed by both parties, and those would only come from the mainland. Cutting off supply routes would not be beneficial to both parties as it would impact their survival heavily. Thus, as long as the other party did not intrude on each other's ship docks, no one was supposed to attack the other party's supply boats. Both parties complied with this truce. It was because once one party started to cut off the supply route of the other, the opposite would do the same. It would lead to both perishing meaninglessly due to lack of supplies. Not to mention that there were more things to worry about while traveling across these dangerous waters. Thus, until now, nothing of this sort happened. It was one of the things that Mark learned last night from Padua and Geronimo. And likewise, not reported to other settlements. Why? It was while smart people would allow this truce, the narrow-minded politicians in other settlements would not. Of course, even if they knew, there was nothing they could do. However, in the minute chance that things go back to normal, there would be repercussions to face. That was why they decided to keep things like this for now without reporting it. Unfortunately, there was no need to mention reporting. It seemed that the rebels already decided to break the agreement. After the lieutenant shouted, a man wearing a camouflage jacket stood up from that boat the former were facing. "Lieutenant, it's nothing personal. We're just following orders," the man shouted back with a snicker. "We heard that a group came carrying a package. Surrender that group and the package, and we'll let everyone else pass." Lieutenant Ignacio frowned. No wonder this situation happened at this time. Different from before, they were carrying people from Infanta carrying a package. And, of course, these rebels were not aiming for the supplies they were transporting. "What are we going to do, Lieutenant?" a soldier beside Lieutenant Ignacio asked. The situation was not favorable for them. It was either give up the people they were supposed to bring or fight to their deaths. The lieutenant closed his eyes, pinching his sinus due to stress. This was a tricky situation. In the first place, the fault here lay on the military. It seemed that the spies in their ranks ratted out the arrival of this group and the package they were carrying. If Lieutenant decided to give up the group and the package, the group would not end well, especially the beautiful girl. The package might also be crucial as it was sent by a general from another settlement. To the side, Mark was waiting for the lieutenant's decision. He then looked at his group. "Get ready," he said calmly. The soldiers heard that and were confused. Get ready for what? At this moment, the lieutenant was at a total loss. "Lieutenant, hurry up. We don't have all day," the leader of the enemy group shouted from his boat. But then, someone came out, Standing beside the lieutenant, he could not help but look and saw Mark, who came out. "What are you doing here? It's dangerous. Please go back inside," the lieutenant warned. "Don't mind me," Mark replied. "Just decide already." Lieutenant Ignacio turned to Mark. The pressure in his mind strengthened. Finally, Lieutenant Ignacio took another look at the enemies before making some signals with his hand behind his back. Receiving his orders, the soldiers stealthily prepared. Seeing a person that did not seem to be a soldier came out, the leader of the enemies shouted, "Are you the one carrying the package? Just go with us, and no one will get hurt." Mark stared at the guy with his eyes half closed. He could tell that the guy was bluffing. Even if his group came with these guys, there was no way they would let these soldiers go. After all, the agreement was still in effect. If these soldiers died here, no one would be able to report what happened. In any case, Lieutenant Ignacio already decided, and it was a positive decision. As such, Mark shouted back, "If you idiots leave now, no one will get hurt." Everyone froze. What the hell was he saying? Lieutenant Ignacio wanted to pull Mark away as the preparation of his men would be noticed if he continued. On the other hand, "Ha ha ha ha, you all heard that?" The man laughed out loud, ridiculing Mark. A series of insulting laughter ensued as the rebels followed suit with the boisterous laughter. And then, Mark spoke. "Stomach." At the drop of his word, a gunshot was heard from behind. With a beam-like flash, blood had splattered. The leader of the enemies was frozen stiff as all his body sensation was filled with pain. He managed to take a last look at his body and saw a fist-sized hole on his stomach. Shivering in fear, he touched the hole. He was hoping that it was just an illusion. Only when his hands were filled with his warm blood was when he realized that he was dying. The leader of the enemies fell to the water. Everyone then saw that it was not only him. 3 more people that were seated behind had already perished. Everyone was in disarray as they searched for who made that shot. It was when the soldiers saw May with her snow-white sniper sword poking out of the boat's window. On the other side, the rebels lost their leader suddenly. Without someone leading them and with very little time for someone to take over, they all decided on one thing. "Shoot! Shoot! Kill!" The rebels shouted as they aimed their guns and fired. "Take cover!" Lieutenant Ignacio shouted in desperation. The events were too sudden. There was no time for anyone to hide at all. Fear enveloped the soldiers. A rain of bullets was shot towards their boat along with the roars of the rebels to kill everyone. It was all over for them. Even if some managed to survive the first volley and counterattacked, a boat filled with holes would not bring them to safety anymore. As the soldiers scurried to find cover, some of them managed to glance at Mark. Unexpectedly, he did not move from the spot at all. Some thought that he was frozen stiff until he called out a name. "Iola." Mark called out, and there, the bullets did not hit their boat. In fact, not a single metallic clanging or screams of pain were heard. As the soldiers came to their senses, their eyes opened wide. They saw the rain of bullets stopping midair before falling to the water like a downpour. That was when everyone noticed that the whole boat was covered in some sort of invisible barrier. On the other side, the rebels were frozen stiff. What kind of technology was this? That question filled their minds, thinking that the military deployed some sort of futuristic weapon. However, that was not the end of it. May, like an agile cat, jumped onto the roof of the boat. She then started shooting the rebels with her sniper sword, one by one. The rebels tried to retaliate more. But like before, their bullets did not even reach the boat of the military until each plopped into the water. *T. Retreat. Retreat. Screams were heard as the remaining rebels decided to escape. The engines of their motorboats roared loudly as they started them once more. But then, Mark tapped his foot. Bam, bam, bam. With black sparks of electricity, the engines of the motorboats exploded one after another. Shock, fear, and despair filled the hearts and minds of the rebels. The smarter ones immediately abandoned their boats. They started jumping into the water to evade the shots that May was firing. The soldiers stared at the spectacle. They were not even able to do anything at all. Before their eyes, the situation took a drastic turnaround in their favor. And it was all because of Mark's group. It was without a doubt. Lieutenant. What are we going to do now? A soldier called out to their frozen superior. Lieutenant Ignacio was staring at Mark, reevaluating him and his group. He was sure that he made a mistake during their introductions, thinking that the other members of their group were just baggage. Especially that beautiful girl with a sniper rifle. None of her shots were wasted. Being called by his subordinate, the lieutenant looked at the surroundings and noticed the rebels that were swimming away. Capture them. We should squeeze out who tipped the information. The lieutenant gave his orders, but then, Mark stretched out his arm, blocking the soldier that received the order. What are you? The soldier tried to ask Mark about his problem, but before he was able to finish, Mark cut him off. Restart the engine and go full speed if you still want to live. The soldier was confused and turned back to his superior. Lieutenant Ignacio was also confused until he saw Mark glancing at the water. He was suddenly filled with dread. Quick! Restart the engine. Full speed. With the urgent order of their leader, the soldiers moved. The engine was restarted, and the boat moved away as fast as possible. The rebels that jumped into the water were relieved after seeing the military boat leave. But then, screams started to ensue, turning their relief into fear. Ah! Help! A rebel cried out as he desperately waved his hands. Nevertheless, it was futile. The rebel was dragged underwater by who knows what. It did not end with that one guy. All those in the water were pulled underwater. One rebel tried to swim back to the boats they abandoned, but then, he felt a painful sensation on his foot as his body was dragged into the water. That was when the rebel saw what was happening. Hundreds of fishes, about the size of a truck wheel, were attacking everyone. They were not just being bitten, but the mouths of the fishes were large enough to swallow a human limb in one go. It was the reason why everyone was being pulled into the water. Some rebels were lucky and managed to return to their broken boats. Some even sacrificed their limbs, wailing in pain with their missing hand or foot. However, it looked like they were destined to be killed here. It was because, one by one, those that returned to the boats had their heads explode by the shots of a sniper rifle. Soon, there was nothing left of the rebels but their broken boats left to drift aimlessly with the ocean current. Day 147 to 10:15 a.m. Langanoi Gulf, Kodan, Catanduanes. The soldiers in the patrol vessel had their eyes pinned to the dying rebels as they made their escape. Looking at the demise of the rebels, some of them could not help but turn blue. It was not because of what happened to them, though. It was because of the school of gigantic fish that tore the bodies of those people like tofu. Some of the soldiers could not help but turn to Mark. He seemed to have predicted this to happen in advance. They did not know how he did it. However, it was, without a doubt, the case since he stopped the lieutenant from capturing the rebels and told them to leave right away. Mark aside, there was also the beautiful girl that had just jumped down from the roof of the boat. To these soldiers' envy, she went straight to Mark with a look asking if she did well. As if it was natural, Mark caressed her head for the job well done. The soldiers could only stare at May's cute face as she was complimented by Mark. No, no, no. That was not what they were looking at. They were amazed by her shooting abilities. Although not all of them were experts, they noticed that May handled her gun amateurishly. Even so, while the form and posture were lacking, the important thing was that she did not miss a single shot. There was no point in a perfect posture if the shots missed the target after all. In the worst cases, a single mistake was a matter of life and death. There was also May's strange-looking gun that who knows where it came from. All these soldiers were sure that she did not bring anything as big as that when they boarded the boat. The last thing that they could not fathom was the invisible shield that was currently covering the whole boat. The soldiers only heard Mark shout, "Iola!" before this shield appeared. What was Iola? A name? A chant? What was this shield? New technology? Magic? There were a lot of questions. However, with the brutal end of the group of rebels that ambushed them, only an idiot would dare ask Mark. Nevertheless, the most important question. The soldiers thought that it was just a group of people tasked to deliver a package at first. But now, just was kind of powerful beings, did they let ride their boat? Putting all of the things that happened on a mental note, Lieutenant Ignacio decided not to ask any question. At first, in his eyes, Mark's group was just a band of lucky people. But now, they were mysterious and unfathomable. It was better to get on their good side instead. Now that he thought about it, it seemed that Captain Zachariah's future would be bleak now. "It looks like we owe your group this time," Lieutenant Ignacio said to Mark, looking at the boats of the rebels. The boats already started to drift away, following the ocean current. "If you didn't tell us to leave, things might become dangerous." The lieutenant added, "Are those fishes that dangerous?" Mark asked. "You might not know since you are not from here, but those fishes are the most dangerous predator in these parts currently. Those are evolved sardinellas always found in schools of several hundred fishes. Now, we call them steel-teeth fish because their large mouths can pierce metal. Look at how they easily bit off the limbs of those bastards as if they did not have bones at all. If we did not manage to get away in time, in the worst case, our boat will sink. If we are lucky, we'll still get stranded in the middle of the sea for who knows how long." "Stranded?" Mark asked. After all, while it was not strange that the boat would sink from those ferocious fish, but why stranded? Because those fishes are pretty much blind and highly sensitive to sunlight. That is why they are mostly active at night. The lieutenant explained further. They don't hunt using their eyes but by feeling their surroundings. Those fishes target things that make a lot of vibrations on water. So, that was the case. Mark nodded. It was no wonder those fishes targeted the limbs of the rebels first. While swimming, a human needed to move their hands and feet to keep afloat. Well, at least while alive. The dead only had to stay dead and start wood floating after some time. The fight had already ended, and there was no need for Mark to stay outside. Together with May, they entered the boat once more. "Iola, you can remove the shield now," Mark said, patting Iola's head. "Okay." The girl smiled. This time, she was the most helpful. Of course, Abigail and Miracle were both sulking. They did not have to do anything at all. Or rather, there was nothing they could do. They were in the middle of the sea, after all. Mark could only shake his head. He had a family of battle maniacs. It was not a bad thing, though, as it was better than being weak while in the middle of the apocalypse. Asterisk asterisk. We're almost there. The voice of the soldiers could be heard after traveling for some time. Even though the distance here between the two landmasses was shorter compared to the regular route back before the apocalypse, it still took about more than an hour journey. It included the time spent during the ambush of the rebels. Mark's group came out to see their destination. Sure enough, the scene was way too different from before the apocalypse. In a bad way, of course. The desolate village in this part of the island was no more. It was replaced by a noisy and boisterous refugee camp. "There's a lot of people," May said, looking at the pier. She was not referring to the number of people inside the settlement. What she was literally saying that there was a lot of people waiting at the pier. Were they here to welcome Mark's group? Of course not. They are people who are still hoping that their relatives or friends made it here, even though it is very unlikely. Mark replied to her. "You are right about that." Lieutenant Ignacio chimed in. "Those people are still waiting for their relatives, friends, lovers, or even just acquaintances. They would wait here every time we depart and arrive only to leave disappointed. Though this time, it is not only those people were here to wait." That was right, there was quite a number of soldiers present at the pier too. It was a number that exceeded the workforce needed to unload the cargo. And by the looks of it, they were ready to depart at a moment's notice. "Did they notice the ambush?" Mark asked, glancing at Lieutenant Ignacio. "Probably," the lieutenant replied. "Although we are ambushed pretty far away, it's not impossible to see with the right equipment." That was true. If there were many people here waiting for the boat, some of them might be carrying binoculars or just had better eyesight for being an evolver or a mutator. "Why didn't they depart, though?" Pephile asked, looking down on the military. If they were already here, why did they not depart to aid the boat or, at least, escort it for the rest of the way? Lieutenant Ignacio looked at the man who was wearing a hood and covering his face. He was a bit bitter that their force was being belittled by him. However, he could not get angry at all. It was better not to. It is not like they are not willing to depart. The response boats are already on standby. Lieutenant Ignacio replied, pointing at the boats already manned by soldiers. However, due to fuel constraints, they would not depart without receiving an emergency notification from us. I was about to tell my men to send the notification when you people quickly dealt with the problem. I see, then. Pephile shrugged and returned inside the boat. He was not that interested in seeing those humans, and there were still several minutes to arrive at the pier. Those minutes passed like flash, though. It did not take long, and Mark's group was already disembarking at the dock. As expected, the eyes of everyone was on the boat. Since Mark's group was not wearing any disguise aside from Pephile, they took quite an attention from the gallery, especially May. Of course, there was a lot of disappointment. It was because the people that disembarked the boat were not who they were hoping for. On the other hand, the soldiers that were waiting immediately asked the lieutenant for the sitrep. Receiving the report without any lie, however, made the soldiers in front of the lieutenant look at Mark's group. Their faces were filled with a bit of disbelief. Soon, a man, probably in his early 50s, approached Mark's group together with his entourage. I am Lieutenant General Alfonso Padilla. Is your group really here to deliver a package from Faustino? The man introduced himself and asked that question, showing the letter that Mark gave to Captain Zachariah last night. Mark was not really surprised. He already saw this guy's face in the papers that General Faustino gave him. You haven't received any notification? Mark asked. His tone, however, did not seem to be welcomed since he was already receiving glares from some soldiers. The communication is still down for the moment. We can't establish any connection to other settlements because of some radio interference. A man beside the general replied with an annoyed expression. By the looks of it, a lot of these people were not convinced that Mark's group was really here for the purpose they stated. It was not surprising since there was no way that a very important package from another settlement would be handed to a group of people without any military escort. Mark glanced at the man for a second before taking out another letter. Then, this should affirm it, right? He handed the letter to the general, in which the latter checked immediately. Though this time, it seemed that this general was more convinced. It was the standard procedure, after all. There would be several letters handed to the private courier to ascertain his identity. Not only just the letter he showed to gain entry. Good, this proves your identity. The general nodded. There were 2 letters with different formats and contents with the same military seal. There was no doubt now that Mark's group was sent by General Faustino. Then, can you receive this already? Mark said unceremoniously as he almost shoved the briefcase on the general's face. No, not here. The general raised his hands. There are standard procedures to be followed. I'll officially receive that in the office, later. That was the correct thing to do. After all, they would need to check the contents of the package. It was not appropriate to do that here in the open where a lot of people could witness what it was. How troublesome. Mark shrugged. General Perez received his on the spot without care. What Mark said was rather rude, but he could not be blamed. He was only stopping by these guys because of the package and had other things to do. That was why he wanted to give the package immediately. On the other hand, the general was also surprised. From what Mark said, he had delivered a package to Bay City before here. It meant that this group not only traveled to this place but also traversed the highly infected cityscape. Although it was unbelievable, the general could not detect any lie on Mark's face or voice. Well, the general aside, it seemed that not everyone had the same insight. How can a courier like you show that kind of attitude to your superiors? Another man in the general's entourage yelled. Day 147 to 10:45 a.m., port area, Catanduanes military settlement, Codon, San Andres, Catanduanes. The pier was brimming with people. There were the ones that were waiting for the return of the boat. There were the soldiers. And some other people were also present just because the general and his entourage were here. Having the settlement leader show himself in public was more or less like seeing a popular actor or actress in these times. This case even more in larger settlements like Bay City and this place. It was due to the fact that both the two locations were facing more dangers. There was almost no time for the leaders to show their faces in public while planning countermeasures they needed to implement while facing those dangers. It was, specifically, the case here in Katandwana's military settlement. The island was large. Most places inhabited by people were built by the coast. It left the central areas of the island, the mountains, and forests, mostly untouched. Although it was where the island inhabitants rely on their needs like wild fruits, vegetables, and firewood. There was still a large number of animals and insects living there. Now, those animals and insects posed a lot of danger to humans after they evolved. Not to mention that the island was surrounded by ocean waters, where evolved fishes might come ashore at any given time. And there was also the rebels on the northern side of the island. The only thing that made this place a little better was that the island was free of the infected. Well, at least, as far as they knew. Now, the general and his entourage were actually here at the pier. Of course, some people would not pass the opportunity to see them. Unexpectedly, as some arrogant shouting was heard, not only those that came to see the general but also those with other purposes had their attention locked on the drama. May's appearance was already gathering attention, and now, Mark was too. In the worst way, though. "Who is that guy Sir Andrew is yelling at?" someone in the gallery asked the person beside him. "Don't, but the situation won't be good for him. Sir Andrew is an arrogant one, especially since he is a mutator. The only good thing about him is he's loyal to the general," the person replied. "Too loyal, in fact." That was right. This guy called Andrew was too loyal to the general. He might be an arrogant one, but the thing that would drive him angry the most was when the general was being disrespected. As he received such unnecessary attention, Mark's mood soured. He might not have cared if it was not for this because he was sure that General Faustino stated their relation to the military. However, this guy just had to do it here. That was why before General Padilla could even make his subordinate shut up, Mark already took a step forward. "What is your basis in saying that? Tell me," Mark asked, tilting his head to his right shoulder. "What attitude do I have? What attitude should I show? And why should I show it? Based on what?" The man called Andrew was taken aback by the sudden bombardment of questions from Mark. But even so, he thought that he was in the right here. Although he faltered a bit, he still answered arrogantly. "Because it's the military, who hired you. You're just a courier. You should show respect to your superiors." That was what this Andrew thought. After all, it was already the norm for workers to show respect to their bosses. It was due to the fact that a single disrespect could lead the person to be fired from his job. Mark, however, did not show a respectful attitude. "You must have been paid to bring this package, right? For someone receiving payment, you show that kind of attitude?" Andrew added. "So, you are saying that someone receiving something from the military should kneel down and show respect, am I right? After all, we are just leeching off supplies from you guys while all of you did the hard work," Mark said with a smirk and with his eyes with a hidden red glow. General Padilla did not see the glow in Mark's eyes, but he realized what Mark was trying to do. He attempted to stop Andrew. Unfortunately, he was too late. "That's right," Andrew replied. His voice and attitude were devoid of hesitation. But then, he snapped out as he covered his mouth. He realized what he just said. "What did I just?" Andrew turned around. The glares of everyone in the gallery towards him were colder than winter. It was already late. All Andrew could do was turn back to Mark and lash out. "UF***CKER. You did this on purpose." "I didn't." "You did." Mark shrugged. "While I did receive some payment to deliver that package, I was by request. My group is not hired by anyone. General Faustino specifically requested for us to bring this package because I have some business to do here." Mark then stepped forward even more, almost invading the guy's private space. In the first place, I'm not a dog of the military. I'm not a subordinate of any of you. My group don't even live inside a settlement you guys manage. We don't leech anything from the military. What made you think that I should be bowing down in front of you people? Why, you bastard. Andrew raised his hand about to punch Mark. Andrew, stop it, General Padilla shouted, making Andrew freeze. TCH. Mark clicked his tongue. He was waiting for his guy to attack first. Since the general finally decided to intervene, there was no way for that to happen anymore. He turned around, joining May and the others. Of course, not without a word of warning. General, we'll just roam around. Just find us if you want to receive the package already. Don't prepare accommodation for us. This dog might bark at us again if you did. Also, leash that dog. A car might hit in the middle of the road. It will be a pity if one of your loyal dogs suddenly died. You bastard. Who are you calling a dog? Andrew roared and tried to charge at Mark, but he was restrained by the other soldiers. Bring him away. The general ordered his men to take Andrew away. He could not help but rub his temples. Are you fine, General? Is it really okay to let that guy go away freely? A woman beside General Padilla asked. He was the general's secretary, Vanessa. Take a look at this. General Padilla gave the second letter to his secretary to check. Vanessa skimmed the letter quickly and was surprised. Is this true? Vanessa asked with her eyes glued to Mark's group that was already leaving the port. Normally, people that came here would need to be checked and were given an escort. However, his group just left like that and was allowed to by the general. I don't know if that is true, but I don't think that Faustino will lie. The general replied. Andrew just provoked someone he shouldn't have. If the contents of this letter are true, then Andrew is totally out of the line. Who would think that it was not that group of survivors are indebted to the military, but it was the two settlements that owe them a lot? In any case, it's better not to antagonize them any further. It also stated in the letter to not provoke them in any manner, or we don't know what consequences we will be facing. The general sighed. That man called Mark also said that they had another business for coming here. We should try to know what that is. That person is dangerous, isn't he? Vanessa said, returning the letter to the general. If you did not stop Andrew, it will give that man a reason to retaliate physically. To those words, General Padilla did not reply. The general was thinking carefully. After all, none of them knew the reason for that dangerous group to come to this place. They should at least try to know, since it might turn out to be a bad thing. Furthermore, there were several pages of the letter that they had not read yet. It might explain some circumstances about that group of people. Mark joined the group and left the soldiers. The gallery parted like the Red Sea, letting the group pass. Papa, should we kill that bad person? Miracle asked while gesturing Mark to carry her up. The people around were rather shocked at that. How old was the girl? 3, 4. Those bloodthirsty words were truly unfit for a cute girl. Mark carried Miracle with a smile, if he tried to do it again. That reply surely made the people hearing it shiver as they started to move further away from Mark's group. Boss, what are we going to do now? Edsel asked. Let's roam around the place first. Then we'll find a place to camp out. No one questioned Mark's decision. For everyone here, camping out felt more comfortable than staying in a place filled with people. It seemed that staying in the mountain base adapted them more into this kind of lifestyle. Wandering around the settlement was quite uncomfortable. There were a lot of people, and most people they passed by on the road would stare at the newcomers. It was already fortunate that no one came to stop them and ask or offer things. They did not need such a thing to happen. Well, it was mostly because of Mark's natural dark aura that the people that would normally go and encircle newcomers to ask questions stay away. Mark turned his head in a certain direction and sighed. He did this from time to time, and the others could not help but notice it. Gerger, are you looking for someone? May asked as she noticed that there would always be a person where Mark would suddenly turn his head to. No, let's go. Mark shook his head as they continued to roam the place. Of course, Mark was looking for clues as to where his family was. And without a doubt, they were not here in this settlement. Instead, what he was detecting were his relatives from his mother's side. After all, San Andres Catanduanes was his mother's hometown. He had a lot of relatives here, but it was not like he knew any of them. And thus, he just continued to roam around the settlement, wondering if he would find someone he knew. It was not like he did not want to ask them. However, things would become a bit troublesome in terms of familial relationships in the outbreak. He was doing well in the apocalypse. It would not be surprising if the relatives started asking for a share of it. That was why he would rather not associate himself with them than to receive these kinds of troubles. From time to time, Mark would also stealthily glance from behind. He could only shrug. It was not surprising that they were being followed. Mark could recognize one as it seemed to be one of the general's people. It was not really a problem since the general had to do this. The problem was the other party, though. Mark could not recognize them. In any case, Mark had no reason to let them know that he knew that they were following behind his group. It was not the time yet to stir a big commotion. Still, if they made a dangerous move, Mark would not hesitate to dispose of them. While roaming around, they heard a growl. Well, it was not some animal. It was Emika's stomach. She had been quiet since there were a lot of people around. However, it seemed that her empty stomach could not. All right, let's find somewhere to eat, Mark said. He remembered that they had not gotten a proper breakfast yet. Day 147 to 12:22 p.m. West District, Catanduanes Military Settlement, Codon, San Andres, Catanduanes. Gerger, what is this place? May asked Mark as he brought them here after talking about wanting to eat something. It was not surprising that she would ask. After all, Mark brought them to a place with a lot of people. And to say, a lot, this place was not any less populated compared to the pier this morning. Nevertheless, this number of people indicated that Mark brought the group to the correct location. This should be the trading area. Remember? Bay City also had something like this. The same for Infanta if I'm correct. Mark said, pointing at a few buildings surrounded by military tents. Outside the buildings, there were a few groups of soldiers on guard duty. It was pretty much the same setup that other military settlements initially had with their trade posts. It was where the workers could use their contribution points to exchange for food and other necessities. But of course, other people also started to trade here. They were bartering their personal belongings in exchange for things they might need. A good example was people that managed to bring more clothes than food. They could trade their extra clothing to other people in exchange for another meal. Another example was survivor groups that could hunt animals from the mountain or fish from the sea. They also went here to trade their items. They could trade their extra belongings to the military. However, the military had a fixed price for things, and no profit could be obtained by more desperate people and people that wanted more. Nay, uncle. What are we doing here? Aren't we going to eat? Emika asked, tugging on the hem of Mark's clothes. We're just passing by, Mark replied. We'll go to the west coastal area to eat. Emika nodded after hearing Mark's reply. She understood why they would go to a secluded location to eat. If they did not, it was likely that what happened last night would happen again. And this time, it could be much worse. Along the way, the people's attention was on their group like before. It was even worse because there were a lot of people. New faces, May's appearance, and even Emika's hair color, all these were more than enough for their group to be the center of attention. The most annoying part was when they passed by a group of unruly people, whistling at May. Of course, their whistles suddenly turned to coughs of blood, which horrified everyone around. No one knew what happened. The only thing they understood that it might have something to do with the group that they offended. This also caused the people that witnessed that to mind their own business. In the first place, a group able to keep a woman with that kind of beauty meant that they were likely to be strong people. In the state of the world right now, a beauty like that was trouble. Anyone that had even a little bit of it could have been broken by animals in human skin already. With the regular people staying away, however, the stronger ones appeared. That's just cruel, don't you think? A man that Mark had just passed by spoke. There's no harm done with just whistling. There was no need to ask who he was talking to as he was staring at Mark. Even so, the man was right. That whistling might be offending, but it did no harm. Mark did not hold back and scarred those men's subconscious. In the future, even if a beautiful woman stripped in front of those men, their spear heroes would not rise. What was surprising, though, was this man talking to Mark could sense that. Mark glanced at the man. Why don't you let them whistle at your wife or girlfriend then? No, you must be single. That's why you think that it's cruel. With those words, Mark led his group away. The man they left behind was twitching. He was a little angry and very embarrassed. Mark definitely hit a nail. What was worse was that the man was probably 5 or more years older than Mark. Definitely a wizard. Well, Mark was also the same before the apocalypse. He never had a girlfriend, and May was his first relationship. But in the least, he understood people's emotions, and he had seen such circumstances before. That man was just a dense one. Passing by the trading area under the eyes of almost everyone, it did not take long, and they reached the western border of the settlement. That was when they were stopped by the soldiers guarding the area. "Where are you people going?" "Outside, fishing," Mark replied. The soldiers were confused. After all, they had never seen this group among the usual groups that go out by the coast to fish. Nevertheless, there was no need for them to ask more questions than necessary. Passes. The soldier in front of Mark stretched his right hand out, asking for something. Mark could not help but look back to his group. "We forgot to ask for passes, didn't we?" "Won't our passes in Bay City work?" Edsel asked. It was a reasonable question since the military belonged to a single organization. "It won't work," Mark replied. The settlements had different implemented systems. Their conversation was heard by the soldiers. One of them could not help but ask, "Did you all just arrive here?" "We arrived this morning," Mark replied. "No wonder," the soldier replied. "Let me make a call and see if we can let you out." It seemed that this soldier was a considerate one. It was not new that anyone arriving in this place lacked food, and the rations from the military would be far from enough to satiate their hunger. And since they were new here, they did not have the contribution points to exchange for supplies. In fact, this was not the first time refugees went out hunting or fishing the very day they arrived. The soldier was mistaken about Mark's group, though. Nevertheless, there was no need to stop him. However, before the soldier could make a call on his radio, it made a noise. "West Guards, West Guards. CC to West Guards." The soldier was surprised as their post was suddenly being called on the radio. Furthermore, the call was actually coming from the command center. Did something happen? "This is the West Guard. Over," the soldier answered. "We've been advised about the group currently wanted to pass the gates." Everyone heard this. The radio was loud, after all. Of course, the soldiers were surprised. Had this group done something? The soldiers gripped their guns just in case. But then, the soldiers relaxed, although a bit confused. "Let them pass. The entry and exit passes are not needed, over." The soldiers looked at Mark's group. What kind of gods were they to have such privilege? Even the command specifically gave the order. Mark just shrugged about it, though. He could not help but glance behind. The person sent by the general to tail them should be the one that informed the general about the situation. In any case, this was convenient. "Affirmative." The soldier replied to the radio, and with another few words, the communication ended. "You may pass," the soldier said as he opened the gate. What he did not expect, however, was that Mark put a bar of chocolate in the soldier's chest pocket. It was clear why. And to say, the soldier was surprised. Chocolates were such a luxury nowadays, even the low-quality ones. The bar of chocolate that he received, however, was obviously imported. This made the soldier even more confused. Why would this group go out to fish if they had such a luxury item to give out? Even just one bar of this kind of chocolate could be traded for a few meals already. The soldier could only stare at the backs of Mark's group with the bar of chocolate in his hands. Who would think that being considerate would reward him today? His children would be delighted when he went home with this. The other soldiers could only stare at that bar of chocolate out of envy. It seemed that they decided to be more respectful the next time they saw that group. "Nay, uncle," Emika called out. "I've seen guys in movies and anime, also in manga, giving packs of cigarettes in these kinds of events. You're the only one I saw giving a can of tuna, slices of fried octopus, and a bar of chocolate." That made May, Edsel, and Pearl almost giggle. Even Pephile smiled. It was true, after all. Not everyone smokes, all right. Mark shrugged. Observe the person you are talking to and give the proper reward or bribe. I also have some packets of cigarettes just in case, you know. Emika tilted her head. Would she be able to do that? Asterisk. Without any hindrance, they reached the coast. There was no danger in this area since it was frequently inhabited by people. There were even some groups at the beach, looking for shellfish and other edible stuff. If some evolved animals came ashore, the military would be able to handle it. It was because north of the coast was another small village that was turned into a military outpost. The arrival of Mark's group did not seem to be too welcomed, though. It was not surprising since another group appearing here would mean another competitor for the things that could be found here. But to everyone's surprise, Mark's group did not go to the shore but picked a flat area near the tall rocks and started to prepare. Prepare a picnic. What in the world? A man digging on the sand to find clams could not help but blurt out. They had been here all before the sun even had risen to find food. It was already noon, and they barely managed to get anything. And there, a group of people going on a picnic. What a drastic contrast. Bro, mind your own business. Another man spoke to the one digging clams. Those people might be mutators. Don't try to offend them. The man digging clams shrugged. If they could only be mutators and evolvers too. Unfortunately, they were just regular people struggling to survive. The man then shook his head. Instead of getting envious, he better focus on getting more food instead. It was the same for other people by the shore. They all put their attention into their work instead of getting distracted. Well, it was until the smell of food scattered everywhere. For the love of God, Mark's group was grilling some octopus meat heavily marinated for the whole night. F***ck. My stomach is growling. A guy cursed. Nevertheless, no one tried to approach them. None of the regular people were brave enough. Yep, regular people. At the entrance to the beach, an armed group arrived. Seeing the group, the people immediately evaded eye contact. Sir Lydon, look. A skinny man spoke to who seemed to be the leader of the group. He was pointing at the group having a picnic not far from the shore. The middle-aged man called Lydon looked in that direction. Sir, it seems that those people had a lot of food with them to be this lax. A muscular man with a heavy rifle spoke. Maybe they will be willing to share. Of course, that sharing did not mean voluntary. These people were definitely up to no good. With a little nod from their leader, the group of 10 armed men made their way towards Mark's group. The other people immediately left the immediate vicinity. After all, this group was filled with ill intentions. Normally, the military would stop these kinds of conflicts. Unfortunately, that man called Lydon was the brother of a high-ranking officer of the military. To be exact, the brother of the leader of the second faction in the military settlement. Even the other factions would not offend this guy unless they wanted to start an internal dispute at the current situation. Day 147 to 12:58 p.m. Western Coast, Kodan, San Andres, Catanduanes. Beautiful scenery by the ocean, a relaxing atmosphere as they ate, and the tasty food in front of them. It felt like the world was not in the threat of the infected. This scene would have been perfect if those people at the shore, staring at their group, would leave. Emika enjoyed her delicious food. This taste was not something that she would get even as a VIP of the settlement in Infanta. Even though the military had a lot of food in stock, their priority was not quality but quantity. They did not have seasonings stored aside from necessary ones like sugar and salt. The amount of those used in food was also limited. Well, at least, they were not handing goop to their refugees. Mark's group, on the other hand, did not give up on such leisure. They had seasonings in stock, and even the usual food in the base was restaurant quality. The cook, Trisha, was from a hotel, after all. Hey, eat slowly. Pephile could not help but tell Amika, who was eating ravenously. Oops. Hee hee. The girl smiled awkwardly. It was not surprising that she was too hungry. They did not eat a lot this morning since their very first activity was to ride a boat. The waves and instability of travel on water could make a lot of people's stomachs feel uncomfortable. It was, even more, when full. Their lunchtime would have been this good. However, after some time, Mark could not help but sigh. Some people could not keep trouble to themselves, after all. Ho ho, what a lavish lunch. Would you people mind sharing? A thin guy wearing some military bulletproof vest and armed with an assault rifle and a pistol on his waist appeared. This guy closed in without any hesitation, and behind him was his whole group. His voice was a little rough and irritating to the ears, even more, because of the way he spoke. Amika frowned. This guy ruined her lunch. No one in the group replied. They all turned to Mark, waiting for his orders. But before Mark could even say anything, another member of the thin man's group spotted May and approached. Look, there's even a beauty here, that member shouted to his group. He even walked behind May before turning to Mark, who sat beside her. Scram. Why is someone ugly like you sitting beside this beauty here? That seat is more suited to our leader. The guy said, panning to everyone. Everyone aside from this woman, leave, also, leave those food behind. This guy was more direct than the thin one. Huh. Mark sighed one more. Can't we have a peaceful lunch here? Peaceful lunch, you say? The rude guy replied. You are in Sir Leiden's territory. You have to pay respects first if you want a peaceful lunch here. Ha ha. The guy was rude and irritating, but then, Mark replied. So, you're saying that if this guy called Leiden is gone, we can have a peaceful lunch here, right? The two rude guys froze, but soon, it turned into a burst of boisterous laughter. Ha 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 ha. Sir, this guy wanted you gone. The thin man laughed out loud and turned to the middle-aged man leading the group behind them. You wanted me gone? Sir Leiden stepped forward, staring at Mark with amusement. At this time, Mark did not even stand up and just stared at the group like he was looking at insects. The other members of Leiden's group did not notice it, but the leader did. It seems like you are not afraid of us at all. Leiden stared at Mark with his eyes sharp. I don't think anyone would be afraid when flies appeared while they are eating. They just have to shoo the flies away, and if they did not leave, kill them, right? Leiden frowned. It was a threat. The guy in front of him was threatening them. If they did not leave, they would be killed. Ha 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 ha. The loud laughter of several men echoed throughout the beach. Leiden then sinisterly spoke. It seems like you all are new here. You don't know who you are speaking to. Since that is the case, we will let you know, the hard way. Leiden then waved his hand, ordering his group. Capture them. Just don't harm the women. We'll have a fun time tonight. And there, the group of 10 armed men ganging up on a group composed of only 3 men, 2 women, and 4 children. To the eyes of the gallery, the latter group would not end well. Asterisk 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 in the woods nearby, the intelligence soldier that was sent by General Padilla was contacting General Padilla already. What in the world is Leiden's group doing there? The general's panicked voice could be heard on the radio. Sir, I don't know. They probably just returned from hunting. But by the looks of it, they were not lucky to find any this time. So that is why they are trying to extort other people again? The general replied. Most likely, sir. The soldier replied. Are we going to interfere? There were a few seconds of silence on the radio. General? The soldier asked. Finally, the general replied. No, don't make a move until the last minute. We'll use this opportunity to test that group and if possible, get rid of that Leiden at once. Sir, are you sure about this? The soldier was rather hesitating about this plan. Asterisk 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 inside his office, The general took a deep breath. "You don't have to worry about this," he said on his private radio. "If there might be a good chance to get rid of those pests, it might be now." The general was quite sinister with his words. It seemed that this Leiden's group had given him nothing but trouble. He then turned to his table. It was the letters that had proven Mark's identity. Among the contents were other important information about Mark's group. If the contents of the letters were true, then Leiden's group kicked a steel plate this time around. Asterisk 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 and, of course, the general was right. Leiden ordered his group to move. But unexpectedly, after their first steps, all of them were rooted in place. "What are you idiots doing?" Leiden yelled in anger. What were his men up to this time? Although there were a lot of times that they were hard to control, there was no way they would play this time. "L leader. We can't move. Our legs are shaking too much." The closes one to Leiden cried out. That was when Leiden noticed the legs of his men shaking for unknown reasons. "Rahhh," one of Leiden's men roared, trying to take another step forward, but then, bam! The uncontrollable shaking of his legs dumped him flat to the sand. "What in the world is going on with you all?" Leiden shouted in anger and confusion. That was when he noticed the man that threatened them a few seconds ago, eating another slice of grilled food. It was the same for the other members of the man's group. After glancing at the statues that tried to surround them, they started eating once more. "You bastard! Are you the one who did this?" Leiden roared at Mark, though he did not have the courage to charge forward. "I did," Mark replied, chewing on his food. "So, what can you do?" Leiden did not know what to do. The situation was really strange. The only thing he noticed was Mark's eyes glowing red and nothing else. And it was obvious that Mark exempted him from the attack as he was the only person in his group that could move right now. Retreat. That was what he should do. Even if he had to abandon his men, he should make his escape. However, Leiden's ego did not allow it. He was confident that his brother's standing was more than enough to scare these measly refugees. "Release my men right now," Leiden roared. "I'm Major General Segura's brother. Offending me won't do you any good." Mark glanced at Leiden. From the Marines? It seemed that Mark recognized the person. "That's right. Release my men right now, and I will give you a way to live," Leiden boasted. But then, Mark snickered. "You think I care?" Mark put a slice of octopus into the grill. "Even if you are the president, don't think you will leave this place alive. I just don't want to end our lunch here, you see. That's why." Mark's red eyes flashed. "Stay put." And there, Leiden's eyes dilated. His body was shaking from unexplainable fear, and his legs were shaking uncontrollably. He could not move at all. What was worse was Leiden and his men. They were forced to watch Mark's group ignore them as they ate lunch. Everyone watching was appalled by this sight. Leiden's group were like statues standing in the sand while a group ate lunch in front of them. However, it did not take long and Leiden and his group started roaring and cursing. All the curses were targeted to that group they tried to target. Finally, Mark could not handle it anymore. "You all are really idiots, aren't you?" Mark stood up. "We can play later, but for now, shut up," he said as he grasped the neck of the thin man that came close to them earlier. "Arrgg." The thin man roared in pain. His arms and legs were squirming for some reason. And then, to everyone's shock, the thin man's arms and legs detached from his torso. It was strange that no blood splashed around as the limbs fell to the group. Nevertheless, everyone was already shocked enough to notice that. All that was left on Mark's hand was a limbless, unconscious guy. Without any mercy, Mark threw the thin man away. He crashed to the ground, leaving a long trail mark on the sand. Leiden's group could not help but shut up. What happened to their comrade was horrifying. But did it end there? Unfortunately, no. Mark gathered the cut limbs, picking them up from the sand. "Hey, uncle. What are you going to do with those?" Emika asked curiously. Mark only glanced at her and did not reply. With a smile, Mark approached the pointy rock that was just a few meters away from where they were eating. It was a tall 4 meters pointed boulder that was about 3 meters wide. And to everyone's confusion, Mark knocked on the rock like someone with a mental illness. "Hey, have some food," Mark said as he dropped the limbs in front of the rock and retreated. And to everyone's shock, the earth tremored. The rock started to shake, and it began to rise from the sand. "Ehhhh!" Emika screamed in shock. Not only her but the others were also surprised. Some people started to run away, thinking that the rock was actually a monster that no one knew. The soldiers in the outpost that noticed the commotion also began to move. It was slow, but it did not take long, and the monster was revealed. There was a gigantic hermit crab. That rock was its house. Like an intelligent creature, it glanced at Mark before moving to the limbs that he dropped. And there, the thin man's limbs became this creature's lunch. "Please leave the location. It's dangerous," the soldiers shouted at Mark and Leiden's groups. Unfortunately, Leiden and his men could not move at all. Well, they could do a step, but they would immediately fall to the ground. Mark, on the other hand, did not mind the soldiers and went back to eat. "Are you all deaf?" a soldier shouted with a megaphone. "Vacate the area immediately." But then, nothing else was heard from that soldier as he also followed the steps of Leiden's group. It was confusing for the soldiers that only responded because of that hermit crab. But then, another surprise came. The hermit crab did not even eat all the limbs and left a leg. It then dragged the leg underneath it and went back into becoming a boulder, digging itself into the sand. Nevertheless, the commotion did not die down. Before Mark's group could finish eating, 2 groups of armed soldiers came to respond to the situation. Day 147 to 1:15 p.m., Western Coast, Kodan, San Andres, Catanduanes. Even after creating such a commotion, Mark decided to sit down and eat. He focused on his stomach more than troubling himself with the current state of the surroundings. And, of course, the soldiers were troubled. Their squad leader was also rooted in the spot like Leiden's group. Without knowing what was going on, the soldiers did not dare make any threatening moves. After all, the unknown was the most terrifying. "Have you always known that there's something under that rock?" Pephile could not help but ask. He was also surprised after that rock started to move. "No," Mark replied. "I just noticed it when we arrived here. I became curious as to why that is here." "No wonder you picked this rocky area when there are other better places to eat." Pephile nodded understandably. In the first place, the rocky area was not that good of a place to eat. However, Mark led the group here. It was still strange, though, and that was why Edsel asked a question. "Boss, is that hermit crab intelligent?" It was a question that everyone in the group was interested in. After all, it was strange that this creature was here lying dormant despite the people around. It was not the case of not being a carnivore either, as everyone just watched it eat the poor guy's limbs. "It is," Mark replied. "Not as intelligent as Chaflar, though. It's staying here exactly because there are people around. It is much safer here." While the first part of Mark's reply answered the question, the latter part gave more. "Safer?" Emika asked. "Yeah. Safer." Mark nodded. "This hermit crab here must have drastically mutated that it can't keep its eggs inside its shell. It is protecting its eggs under it." That answered the question. As it could not keep the eggs inside its shell, the giant hermit crab buried itself in the sand to keep the eggs safe. With the people and soldiers around, this place was free of possible predators, which made this creature stay in this place. "Papa, another pet?" Abigail asked. Out of the 3 girls, she was the one really fond of animals. She was even taking care of Laylaps personally whenever they were home. "Probably not." Mark patted the little girl's head. "Why?" Abigail asked once more. "It's too big to move around. Its home is also the ocean. There's nowhere we can put it at home." Mark replied, and the little girl nodded in understanding. Abigail was a smart girl, after all. While they were chatting without even a bit of care towards the surroundings, several vehicles arrived. "The general?" It was not. A tank-like vehicle came roaring with its engine as it led a group of off-road military jeeps entered the scene. One of the jeeps stopped in front of the others, with a man close to his 50s went out. Seeing that person, Leiden could not help but cry out loud. Brother, Leiden. The man called out. What is going on here? Where is the monster? That was right. It was Major General Antonino Segura from the Philippine Marines. Unfortunately for Leiden, though, it seemed that this group was here for the hermit crab instead of him. Nevertheless, it was an opportunity for Leiden to ask for help. Brother. Help. Leiden cried out one more. This drove his brother and his men into confusion. Help at what? Leiden and his men were there, standing. There was no danger in sight at all. It was when General Segura noticed the thin man nearby, unconscious and with his limbs missing. Of course, the Marines general was familiar with the men of his brother. Finally, it registered in his mind that there was something odd going on. Finally, a soldier from the outpost came to fill in the details. Sure enough, the newly arrived soldiers were surprised to know that Leiden and his group were stuck and unable to move. However, when the soldier pointed at their squad leader, also stuck and unable to move, the general and his men could only believe it. With a signal from the Marines general, his men moved. Raising their guns towards the group having their lunch, one of the soldiers called out. All of you, raise your hands up, you're all under arrest. To their surprise, none of the group's members raised their hands and only took a pitiful glance at the soldiers. Arresting us? What for? Mark asked out loud. For not letting these pests eat our food or play with the women in my group? The Marines had gone low these days, huh? That was said all out loud, and everyone in the vicinity heard it. The Marines soldiers might be loyal to their general, but those words still made their faces heat up. Shut up! The leader of the soldiers shouted. You are under arrest for impeding military operations. Oh, I see. Mark nodded, hitting his left palm with his closed right hand. The lawless activities of these guys are now military operations, huh? The soldier that had shouted just now choked. It was not he was talking about. It was about the monster and Mark's group not leaving the area after the squad leader from the outpost made them vacate the area. However, it was already late. Mark's twisted words made the stares from the surroundings as cold as it could be. The Marines general frowned. Mark had been playing with them. He then decided to step forward himself. You. General Segura called out to Mark. Release my brother and his men from whatever witchcraft you did, and we will let you go. Release them. Mark tilted his head. I'm sorry, but I already said it before. They will die today. I don't care whoever came to vouch for them. Do you really have to make this hard? The Marines general asked. Not changing my mind here. Mark replied nonchalantly. With that, General Segura was fed up. He raised his hand, signaling his men to get ready to fire. I will give you one more chance, General Segura threatened. But this time, the sounds of several vehicles roared once more. It was not from the group of Marines, but another group. Soon, the second group arrived. It was the army, led by General Padilla. General Padilla alighted his vehicle with the same entourage he had this morning when he met Mark's group at the pier. That Andrew was here too. Although he was still glaring at Mark, he seemed to be more subdued at this time. Segura, you better stop what you are doing right now. General Padilla warned the other general. Padilla, what are you doing here? This is none of your business. General Segura roared. Of course it is my business. The army general calmly replied. The group you are pointing your guns right now is the group that had the package from Faustino. That should have been enough to stop the Marines general in normal circumstances. However, he was angered at this moment. If the package is what you all care about, we can take that after we subdued these criminals. At this moment, an audible sigh could be heard. Criminals, he said. What a thick face. Mark shook his head before turning to General Padilla. You're late, you know that. The guy you sent to tail us had been communicating with you, right? How come that these thick-faced guys appeared first? That complaint made General Padilla surprised. After all, Mark knew all along. It was even more surprising since the soldier he sent was a mutator with stealth abilities that was the top among their intelligence spies. Before General Padilla could say anything, Mark dropped a threatening question. "Well, it's good that you're here, though," Mark said as he finally stood up from his seat. "Say, can I kill them all without any consequences from you guys?" That was right. Mark was asking General Padilla for permission to kill. However, it was not only Leiden's group but also the soldiers of the Marines. However, before the Army general could answer that question, the Marines general made the first move without hesitation. "Shoot!" General Segura shouted. The order was given, and the soldiers of the Marines were ready to pull the triggers. It would definitely impact their reputation, but the words of the general came first in priority. And there, the volley of bullets flew off towards Mark's group. General Padilla could only rub his forehead. There was one crucial thing that General Segura did not know. Mark's group could create a shield that could block bullets. And thus, it was displayed here as Mark's group was enveloped with a hazy barrier, stopping all the bullets from hitting their targets. The soldiers emptied their magazines to no avail. All their bullets stopped suspended in the air for a few seconds before falling down. At this time, Mark gave a last look at General Padilla. "Sorry, General, but I'm fed up with these insects." And there, Mark's eyes glowed bright red, releasing sparks at the corners. A cold sensation enveloped the surroundings. The soldiers that fired just now entered a frozen state with their bodies shaking uncontrollably out of fear. One by one, their guns fell from their grips as their hands grew numb. General Segura was not an exception to this. With his dilated eyes, he watched Mark step out of the barrier. Mark approached and stopped in front of him. "Isn't it nice to feel how your brother felt? Since you seem to value brotherhood too much, why not share his pain?" General Segura could not speak. His teeth were clattering violently. The only thing he could do was watch Mark approach Leiden in a threatening way. As Mark went full throttle already, Leiden could not speak either. He could only watch Mark approach fearfully. And there, Mark grasped Leiden's arm, and then, snap. Aarrrgghhh. It was an orchestra of pain. Mark broke Leiden's arm. His wrist and hand dangled before his elbow. In pain, Leiden roared. However, it was not only him. General Segura and his soldiers all screamed with him as his pain was fully transmitted to all of them. The witnesses could not help but step back in both awe and fear after hearing more than 50 fully grown men cry out in pain at the same time. But it did not end there. Mark walked to the other side of Leiden, grasping his other arm. Snap. Ahhhhh. Leiden roared with his eyes flowing with tears. Of course, his backup singers sang the painful song with him. This, however, made some people snap from the effects of fear that Mark induced in their minds. They fell on their knees, grasping their arms in pain although there were no injuries present at all. Mark turned at those people with a shrug. It was not surprising. There were many circumstances that pain could outdo fear. Even a person frozen in fear could start running after they felt pain. At this moment, General Segura knew that they were in great danger. He bit his lip, causing it to bleed. The pain made him at least able to speak. However, he did not beg for mercy or apologize to Mark. Instead, he called out, "Berrak!" General Segura yelled out loud. Everyone was confused as to what he was saying. They thought that he was trying to say something but choked. But then, Mark sensed a presence appear in front of the Marines general. "You called?" A voice was heard as a visage of a person manifested in front of General Segura. There, a man appeared out of thin air. The moment he materialized, though, the man immediately frowned. "What the F***ck did you run into, old man?" he asked the frozen general. He then made a tap on the general's shoulder, unexpectedly freeing him from his current state. The man panned his eyes unto the surroundings, letting the freed general fall on his knees and breathing hard. That was when the man's eyes fell on Mark. "It's you?" the man asked in surprise. Of course, Mark was the same. This person was the very same man that Mark's group passed by in the trading area. The wizard.